Good morning and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I'm your host, Mark Mitchell, preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm joined as always by Steve Fox, a minister for God is the only one who knows how long. How you doing today, buddy?
You're implying that he's that good at math?
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably is. I'm doing okay. I'm the last 14, 15, 16 hours, I didn't really calculate it, but I've been trying to get my mind, what's the word? Coagulated? No, that's not the word. That's not even a word. I'm trying to get my mind arranged because last night it got dearranged. I watched, for the first time in my life, the 1931 version of Frankenstein. And Mark, after an hour and a half, which is how long it was, I was never so disappointed in a movie in all my life. I mean, have you seen it?
No.
Okay, Dr. Frankenstein makes this corpse out of dead men's body parts.
I know what the premise of it is.
Gives it life. And the rest of the movie, that happens right at the beginning, and the rest of the movie is this monster trying to find somebody to kill. And I kept waiting for something that was going to make sense how they ended this thing. Nope. And I told Susie later on, I said, see, in our family, with me and Susie, when we watch a movie and it's not any good, she'll say, well, that was almost as bad as Murder on the Orient Express, because if I die and go to Hades, I'll be watching Murder on the Orient Express for the rest of whatever. But I just felt so, I felt like I was just about ready to have something great and grandeur in my life. I'm going to watch Frankenstein. And it was awful. It was just plain awful. So I'm trying to get my mind back to where it's supposed to be, and I really hope that the parables we look at this morning will make more sense to people than Frankenstein or Dracula.
Well, maybe our audience has the same dilemma that you had last night. The anticipation of something and it doesn't quite meet the expectation.
Not even close.
And we apologize when we don't meet your expectations.
I think we ought to have people call in and say what's the worst movie they ever saw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve and Mark on. Well, this week we are going to be studying in Matthew chapter 25 the parable of, we have two different versions of titles here, Steve. We got 10 virgins or the 10 bridesmaids. This is not unusual for people to have a differing opinion of what the Greek word would have been, because words aren't always just like one word. A lot of times it's a grouping of words that are interpretive, and that's what we have. We have interpretive words. So, but we're going to read it as it's written in the...
Well, before you read, Siskel and Ebert would have to read this too to give some kind of reviews.
Yeah.
On a movie and on the parables. So we'll get with the parables.
You want me to do the reading, or you want to do
first? I'll read first.
Yeah.
Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins, and as Mark said, some translations say maidens, who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. And 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were prudent. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the prudent took oil and flasks along with their lamps. Now while the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the prudent, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the prudent answered, saying, no, there will be not enough for us and you too. Go into the dealers and buy some for yourselves. And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. And later the other virgins also came, saying, Lord, Lord, open up for us. But he answered and said, truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour.
I know this is one of those parables that gives you a view of Jesus that sometimes doesn't make you quite as comfortable as some of the other stories. Like the Samaritan or the prodigal son, gives you that warm feeling that God will take you in. But here we have a story, Jesus tells us that you need to be prepared.
The emphasis is not on the good people who got to go in. The emphasis is the bad people who didn't get to go in because the door was shut. And you and I have gone over and over with this ever since we started this series. Who am I in this parable?
That's right. Who am I? Couple of the points of that are important, I think, to get to us to that moment that the bridegroom comes is a little bit of historical reference. Is that from what I've read a couple times in various storylines, that bridegrooms, it's not like today in our society where
Not even close.
You've got planned things. I mean, someone could plan to leave, and it might be days and weeks, because a lot of things can happen on trips. A lot of things can happen. I apologize. A lot of things can happen on that delay. And so there's an expectation here, but there's not a clear defining moment of exactly when this is going to happen.
They have no idea. And weddings back in the first century were much different than what we have maybe a dinner before, and then the wedding takes an hour and a half, 2 hours,
Small
and then you go to reception, it's over. In the first century, they made a week of it, or maybe 2 weeks of it.
Some of them were, even the one, it was in the second week when they ran out of wine.
Yeah.
Jesus' first miracle. And so these bridesmaids would have been, or virgins, would have been out at the behest of the bride. They would have been there for her to greet the bridegroom and escort him to the bride.
They're all bridesmaids.
Yes.
What we would call bridesmaids.
Right. And so they're there to meet him to help. But 5 of them were prepared for a long wait. 5 of them weren't.
You and I don't carry lamps around that need oil in it, but they had something that had like cloth on the bottom of it, or some kind of linen. We would call it a wick, and it stuck out, so you had to put the oil down in the container, and then you had to light it.
Right.
And if it went out, you may not get to light it again because you don't have any material.
Yeah, you don't
left.
carry matches,
Usually
lighters,
fire extinguisher. No, you
flint rock with you all the time. But hey, there is a this entire story has one specific theme that it runs throughout. Prepared. Be prepared.
And who did they go out to eat meat? They didn't go out to meet her.
No.
They went out to meet the bridegroom.
Right.
Because he was going to bring all these people into the house, and that's when the celebration
to have the bride, to meet with the bride. Yeah. I mean, so we've got. I know that sometimes you want to read this story too. Then you look at the 5 that had prepared. Why didn't they share with those? It seems like you would have had
doesn't sound very Christian, does it?
It
Go
seems
get
like
your own, man. We can't share.
I'm waiting for Jesus as soon as he says that to do the sermon, and they should have shared.
Yeah.
But no, he goes he doubles down.
That goes back to each parable meaning one thing. There's
Right.
one point that he's trying to make. And obviously in this case, he wasn't saying it's always right to never share with anybody.
No.
I mean, you teach your kids that when they're 2 years old.
That wasn't the point of the story. Exactly. I mean, don't take it as, well, I don't have to share.
Well, in every case here, while Jesus tells these parables, you've got people out in the audience just listening. And I'm sure that it didn't take very long in the sequence of the story for them to say, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
Or that's not me. So, Jesus' point is not you shouldn't share with other people. Jesus' point is some of them were prepared and some of them weren't.
Exactly. And important to note, and you're asking yourself the question, okay, am I prepared or am I not?
Mm-hmm.
In a roundabout way, I've actually heard this used in a sermon about those who say, one of these days I'll be in a relationship with God and with Jesus Christ, and then I'll do it and I'll be ready. And in one instance, I totally understand. I until you're ready to commit, don't do anything halfway. I mean, but here's the downside of it. Too often, the waiting just never comes about for you.
I saw a poster one time in a guy's office that said, if you're waiting for midnight, you'll probably die at 11:30.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have any assurance.
Nothing.
None. And that's one of the scary things about Christianity, but that's also one of the rewarding things about Christianity. If you're ready to go, you're ready to go at any time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any difference. They took their lamps, and you notice the ones that weren't very smart didn't take any oil with them. They had oil in their lamps, but they didn't have extra oil. And the bridegroom was delaying. Now this makes perfect sense to me. They all got drowsy and began to sleep.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
We are a group of people who, especially because of our rate of life that we live. Man, yesterday, I don't even remember what I was watching. I fell asleep. I was watching some kind of movie, but I don't remember what. And I remember when I was growing up, my dad and my grandpa would come in the living room on Sunday afternoons, and we would watch the Browns together. And 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, I look over, and my dad and my grandpa are both. I'm going, how can you fall asleep when the Browns are playing? Well, I can fall asleep at my age when almost anything is on TV. It could be the most exciting movie in the world. And so obviously, if this is going to be 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, yeah, they're going to get tired. The word the American Standard uses is drowsy.
Mm-hmm.
They were drowsy and they slept. And when they slept, they were still waiting. And while they were going away to make the purchase, they said, we don't have enough for both of us, go buy some. When they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came. That's who they're waiting for. And those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Several years ago when I was preaching at Elkview, and I don't remember whether this was original with me or whether I stole from somebody else, but in one of the sermons I preached on this parable, and we had at the pulpit at Elkview, we had a side door on this side and a side door on that side. And when I got to the verse that says they were going to make their purchase, and when they came back to the wedding feast, the door was shut, I just kind of gradually walked over towards that door. I'd left it open on purpose. And I said, and the door was shut. And about 12, 14, 16 people jumped. A couple of them probably woke up. But when we left Elkview, I was talking to a lady and she said, do you know the sermon that I will remember the most that you preached? Because I preached there 20 years. I said, what? She said, when you slammed that door in the parable of the maidens, when you slammed that door, she said, that was the most significant thing I have ever seen in a sermon because it really went through my head. The door's going to be shut.
At some point.
And if I'm not ready to go in there, it's going to be shut and nobody can open it. So that's the point of the parable. Please be prepared because one of these days the door is not going to be open anymore.
No. In fact, verse 13, therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. Point taken. Mm-hmm. You know. Be diligent, be prepared, be watchful. So we're all called to be those individuals who are prepared.
And this is not the first parable where Jesus has looked at somebody and said, I don't know you.
Yeah. No.
There are several judgment scenes in the Gospels where Jesus says to people, I don't know you.
Depart from me.
I don't know you. Depart from me.
Sermon on the Mount at the very end, depart from me. I didn't know you.
I didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
Well, I've done all these wonderful things. Well, you didn't. You didn't have your brain. The main thing wasn't the main thing.
That's right.
You've got all kinds of other things and wars and battles that you got to fight and other Christians that you got to fight. But when the main thing is the main thing, you have these people who are invited to the wedding feast.
Yeah. And I love the expression that he uses that in the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know you. Mm-hmm. Meaning, you were worshiping something, but I don't think it was Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to try to get the next one?
Sure.
All right.
It's your turn to read. 14.
Verse 14, the parable of the bags of gold. Again, it will be like a man who, going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the one who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. And after a long time the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, and I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Well, if you start at the end and you go through outer darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth, that's a little more descriptive than and the door was shut.
Then the door was shut.
There might be a lot of things going on when the door is shut, but this is make sure you don't fall prey to this.
Yeah. And there, This is one of those parables that it's really hard to come up with one main thing.
I was going to ask you that. What do you think is the main point of the parable?
To be honest with you, don't waste your talents, I guess would be the one main thing, but actually that's not the one, to me, the one main thing.
Well, the problem that most people have right from the beginning is they think this word talent means the ability to do something.
No.
Well, if you can dance, if you can play guitar, if you can drive real well, all those are talents, but you can't bury any of that stuff.
No, but also on the flip side of it, it is the gifts of God have been given to you, entrusted with you to
Yes.
use. In this case, money was
That was the gift.
that was the gift. But everyone has been given many gifts. It's just not. It's like the air that we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat. All those gifts were given to us by God. Mm-hmm. We harvest, we work, we gather, we do all these things in a way as honoring to the one who gave us the gifts.
Yes. And right from the very beginning of the parable, we understand in verse 14 that he entrusted his possessions to them. So these were his things that they were taking care of, not theirs.
Well,
His talents. Now, I can't give my talents to you.
No.
Even though I've tried many, many times. I can't give my talents to you. You can't give your talents to me. But you can look at a table and say, see that hat right there? I'll give you 5 talents for that hat.
Or, hey, come over and I have extra meat and
Yeah.
we've harvested something.
Yeah.
Come and share.
But people see that word talent and they think of ability, and so they say he gave him their talents, but then they didn't use them. Well, that's a good point. It might be biblical, it might be verified, but he is talking about money. He distributed this money.
He shared what he had and gave it to them, and we
when
all
he got
live in
back,
that world.
Yes.
We all live in that world that God shared with us. Used to be one of my favorite. Every time it came about a lot of times in the Psalms, the cattle on 1,000 hills, always implying that all the herds you see, they're God's. You might be using them, but God created that. He created the first one. He created the process by which they would multiply, and He created their very design, which allows us to eat them and sustain ourselves over. That's all God. Now, you might be one of the best cattle farmers in the region.
Montana.
Yeah, Montana. But they're still not your cows. You may brand them, and you may sell them, and you may eat them, but they weren't yours. They were given to you by God.
And if more parents would understand that,
yeah, children, same thing.
God gave me 3 children.
That's right.
And people who brag about stuff that they accomplished, like, we're getting ready to have the Olympics here, there's going to be a lot of bragging about what I can do and what I can do. If you start to consider that, you will realize that different people have been gifted by God in different areas, and therefore, like Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I don't boast about myself. I shouldn't boast about myself because God's the one who gave me the ability to do that. My best friend in high school was Art Tiberti. I weighed 105 pounds when I was in high school. He weighed 240. Now, I ran the mile on a track team. If Art had wanted to run the mile, we'd still be sitting here talking about it. And if I went over and tried to throw the discus 160 feet, we'd still be here talking about it too.
You'd have to. You need more than one try.
I could, maybe if I threw it 3 times, I could throw it 160 feet. But that is so clear to me, and it wasn't until later in my life But it's so clear to me that when a person accomplishes something, that gift, whatever that gift is, if God didn't give you that, you couldn't accomplish it.
Well, even taking it in the direction that Jesus told the story. In this instance, there has been people, 3 different people, been given an amount that they are in charge of, and they're not all the same. I know that people get aggravated because we live in a society that we have rich people, middle income people, and we have poor people. And I don't want anybody to go hungry, and I don't want anybody to not have. But here's the sad truth of some people can handle 5 bags of gold, some people can't.
That's right.
And some people can't even handle 1 bag of gold. I mean, so not everything in God's economy gives where everybody is given the same amount. The same thing. What we are given equally is the opportunity to have a relationship with Him.
I think that's what the Constitution means when it says all men are created equal.
Before God, we are all.
If a baby is born with a couple, 3 deformities, we don't look at that baby and say,
no, it wasn't created equal.
Yeah, it wasn't created equal.
But before God, is just as loved as the richest person or the most beautiful person. That is hard for us to conceptualize, but in God, He has no problem with that. And we have these men here who immediately, and there's one of those 4-letter words that is just the worst word sometimes in our society.
Work.
Work. They took it and went to work.
And they knew that He was coming back.
They knew He was coming.
They knew that there was going to be some kind of resolution.
There was going to be an accounting.
There was going to be a judgment. There's going to be accounting. They knew that.
They knew that.
And that's why the one guy thought, man, if I try to distribute my wealth here and get, here I'm going to sell this for so many cents, and then I'm going to sell it to somebody else for more than that for what I paid.
What happens if I lose?
They knew that He was coming back, so He said, what if I lose it? If I lose this bag of money, so I'm going to go bury it.
And don't you love the guy's excuse? He says, I knew you were.
Yeah.
I knew who you were.
Wasn't a nice compliment.
No. In other words, you're a thief and a robber. You take what doesn't belong to you, and you conquer whenever you do. Mm-hmm. You know, and I love it the way Jesus puts it. Oh, so I'm that guy. You know, and if you knew that I am that bad of a person, why didn't you at least give it to the banks?
And in these guys' defense, verse 19, now after a long time, the master of the slaves came and settled accounts with them. He didn't give them the money and 3 days later show up.
No.
I don't know what Jesus meant when He said a long time. That could have been a year, 5 years, 10 years.
Normal used to be throughout history, and this is an historical reference because studied in economics class in college. Common conception was if you took and invested, there was a 7-year and a 10-year that you looked at, and it was to double the value of something. Mm-hmm. Okay. 7-year was meaning you did very well. If you take something and invest it, and in 7 years you've doubled it. 10 years would have been a more conservative version of investment, but in other words, I mean, we're talking a reasonable amount of time, and under Jewish understandings, that would have been understood. It just wasn't he went down the road, came right back. You know, if you took 1 bag of gold and put it in to a banker and you got 2 or 3% off of it, he would maybe at least had a half a bag of extra gold.
That's what the master told him at the end.
Yes, at least you would have gained me a half a bag. But I was gone long enough that under normal circumstances, you should be able to double the amount of investments.
When Susie and I were in college in Parkersburg at Ohio Valley College, the ladies who raised money for the school, they were called the Stepping Stones.
Yep.
And the Stepping Stones every year had this annual project. They would pick 10 people, 10 ladies who were at the conference. They would choose 10 ladies and they would hand them a $5 bill. Each one of them had a $5 bill. And the purpose was, next year when we come to this, you're going to tell us how much money you've earned, starting with that $5. And I mean, some women just blew my mind. You know, they gave them $5 and they came back with $2,000 or something like that. You know, they knew what they were doing and they knew how to invest the money.
Yep.
But I don't remember any lady saying, "Well, I went out behind the chapel there and dug a big hole." Put the $5 bill.
As you walk out the door, let me find a rock, dig up, put it back. Okay,
There.
You'll be there when I come back.
1 year from now.
Yeah. That's why I say this to me is one of the hardest parables to come up with your one. Now you can ask the question, which one are you? Mm-hmm. You know, who are you in the story?
But his one point, use what God gave you.
Use what God gave you, if you want to boil it down to. But it encompasses so many other little.
It sure does.
So many other little things because, and the part, like in verse 26, his master replied, "You wicked, lazy servant." 3 definitions there applied to one individual. First of all, he's a servant. Who's he a servant to? He's a servant to the master. And the master entrusted him. You would think this guy would have understood the privilege that the master had given him, given his station in life. All of these men were servants. And even the lowly servant was entrusted with something by God. But then he let, for whatever reason, his understanding of his relationship, and now he's got 2 titles that go with the servant that nobody wants. Wicked and lazy.
Mm-hmm. Nobody wants that.
Nobody.
So finally he said, all you had to do was take it to the bank, give it to the banker, just leave it alone. Now, maybe you'd get 18% interest at the end of the year.
I mean, yeah, you can still be lazy.
Oh, yeah.
And give it to the banker.
And get more money.
And still showed up with something.
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why he got the wicked.
And then he says, take the talent away from him, so he's got nothing, and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. So now he's got 11.
And here's your verse that you were talking about a couple weeks ago.
For to everyone has more will be given, and he shall have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Now I've read this lots of times, and I'm not really sure how a guy with nothing gets his nothing taken away by the master, but that's what Jesus said. Whoever has more will be given. In other words, use what I gave you, and he shall have an abundance. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away.
Well, think of it like this. The one servant was given something, but it was taken away from him. He had nothing to begin with, but was given something, but then that was taken away. I think we all could say that what we have when we die, what we take with us is what?
I've never seen a U-Haul behind a funeral procession.
So basically we take nothing with us anyway. But what do we have on the other side that Jesus talked about many times in his parables? Where are you storing up your treasures?
You got all kinds of things on the other side when you're using it properly.
When you're living the life according to God's economy, in His understanding of how things work.
And the last thing to notice about this parable, he has this guy that messed up. He has possessions that belong to somebody else. Jesus didn't say you can't do with your own possessions what you want to do. He says, these gifts that I give you, those belong to me. And I'm going to give you those gifts, and I'm going to expect some kind of interest or some kind of extra bonus when you get done, when I come back after that long, long journey.
That's right.
And we can't throw this parable out without talking about verse 30. He said he was a worthless slave, and they said cast him. Outer darkness is used in the New Testament several times. Throw him into outer darkness. In that place there shall be weeping. There's a good cry, but there are bad cries. People cry when they just feel awful about something. He says there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't do that very often. People get mad and gnash their teeth like that, or bite other things or bite other people. He says, Jesus is describing hell, and he's saying it's going to be a bad place.
Yeah,
the door is going to be shut.
I always took gnashing of teeth as whenever someone who's cold and their teeth are chattering.
Oh, chattering of teeth. Yeah.
And then there are also, I've seen people who, in circumstances, in a movie or something of that nature, where you fear, they're shaking. I always took that it was someplace you didn't want to be, and you were scared to death.
And outer darkness just sounds horrible.
Who wants to be in dark?
You know, in your own house, where you know where everything is. If the electricity goes off, it's dangerous. So outer darkness, you probably can't see your hand right there.
No. And I've been there a couple times in my life. I've been in that kind of darkness.
But as we prepare in this life to go do what we're supposed to do, and as we prepare in this life to use God's gifts and God's talents, and trying to make sure that we're using them to the best of our ability, we always have to remember, and the door was shut.
You know, you and I have given other gifts. The gift of life is just lose some of your abilities. Look at someone who's in a wheelchair, or someone who's fighting disease, or someone who's dealing with struggles in life. There are varying stages of what you have can be taken away.
Oh, yeah.
So even the life that you have can be taken away. So it is, these two parables are, I mean, it's kind of amazing as Matthew wrote the book, all the parables keep getting a little bit more right in your face.
Yep.
So, well, anything else you'd like to add on before we kind of close this up this week?
No, I think we just covered it brilliantly like a couple of geniuses. No, I don't have anything to add. Look for the one point in the parable and see who you are in that parable.
Yeah, or who we should be anyway. Yeah. Well, on behalf of Steve and I, we're so glad you've tuned in this week. Apologize for not having one last week, but I had a little procedure, and we're not going to talk about it, but I'm better.
Did you tell me it was brain surgery?
They never found it.
No.
They never found it.
That'd be exploratory.
Exploratory. Well, on behalf of Steve
Tell these people that we really like each other.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I mean, I won't hurt him at all, I promise. See y'all next week.
He's bigger than I am.
As the mountains surround Jerusalem,